Well, hello and welcome once again to Bite by Bite, this journey into the living of the divine will. I'm Larry Leopold. I'm a Carmelite, and I'm together with Dr. Lois Larry. We're both Carmelites looking to learn and live in this great gift of the divine will. And as we present these episodes, which tonight we'll be doing episode 44, we try to examine how, as we try to grow and be healed along the way, so that we can advance and come deeper and deeper into the heart and the center of the divine will, into the heart and center of Jesus and his humanity, so that we, in our journey of the divine will, are able to do it more continually, or have our prayers more effective. And as we do them, become more and more transformed into the very love that we are allowing Jesus to pray and do in us. Right tonight, as we explore with the help of Dr. Lois, and it's so good to see you, Doctor. We are exploring wounds that may have come from an overly critical mother. Right. Last time we did our journey in this particular part of the healing of wounds, we talked about the over authoritarian father. So as we look now at mother wounds, Dr. Lois, you were saying earlier there are as many different kinds of mother wounds as there are mothers, and we who have mothers can attest to that. And we love them, right? And many of us are mothers. Not
Right,
myself, mind you.
right.
Although,
Myself included, right?
and so as we do these examines and look at perhaps some of what you've experienced in your childhood, in your relationship with your mom,
Yes,
um, and
yes.
some of the difficulties that may have happened then, or even may have followed you into your adulthood, and you might experience effects of that or your relationship with your mom, and how what is that? Where did that come from? Now, Dr. Lois will be going through a series of very curious and things that are damaging that we have experienced. All right. Now, these, as you will point out, are not abnormal or diagnostically
Mm-mm.
dysfunctional,
No.
but these are the wounds that we all perhaps have experienced to some degree or other, and we
Mm.
invite you to share your your question, your experience briefly in your comments section, if you care to, so that as we go through our conversation and we see your comments, we might be able to tie it into our presentation tonight. All right. And so, with that, Dr. Lois, I'd like to again thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to hear how you're going to lay this out for us. But before you do, would you be so kind as to guide us into a prayer, perhaps to our mother, our blessed mother? Right?
Absolutely. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And Father, we come to you on this blessed feast day of the Annunciation, and we are especially asking our Holy Mother to cover us all with her mantle and to pray to the Holy Spirit just to be poured out upon us tonight. We're praying that people will be able to hear what the Holy Spirit is teaching them and showing them. And more than that, that they will be able to be comforted and have hope on this journey as we all seek to live deeper with Jesus, deeper intimacy with Jesus in the divine will. We ask little Teresa of the little flower. We ask Louisa. We ask all the holy angels and saints to accompany us, to pray for us. And we thank you for this opportunity, Lord. We just bless you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. And so, Doctor, as we approach this topic, the mother wound, and as we do with all our topics, we do it with hopefully in the a way of looking at the divine will, both as our goal and as our source of healing. Okay, our source of mothering, if you wish. Okay, in our Father, Mother, God, we can say that because He has both within Him. But
Yes.
as I would love you to kind of go and explain a little bit about this mother wound, all right? And share with us what are we talking about tonight?
Okay. With the mother wound, one thing is it's a very wide category, and one person describes it, one academic, I assume, and clinician describes it as a difficult relationship with your mother. That's pretty wide.
All right.
We're going to narrow it down a little bit, but I just wanted to let people know a couple things. One is this is about that relationship with your mother going from the early childhood to even as we become adults, anywhere along the line there. And it's looking at the severity and the pattern of that relationship. So if you hear something and you're like, oh, my mother did that, I have a mother wound, that might not be accurate. It's really hearing a whole pattern and identifying yourself as a child as someone who lived in an environment where that mother wound was created. Where that the other thing too about a mother wound that the definition is that it's the emotional pain and the trauma that's caused by having a mother who can provide for us physically but didn't provide for us, or lacked in this area, didn't provide for us fully emotionally. And how I think about it, just after reviewing all the literature, it seems to, not all the literature, quite a bit, it seems to me that it is a relationship where the child does not receive validation. That's number one. They may receive a lot of criticism, but the mother isn't sensitive and attuned to the child's emotional needs. And the mother isn't always emotionally available. And that's a different thing than being a good mother and providing for all the physical needs. There are a lot of reasons why mothers cannot be emotionally available. And it has to do with their own mothering, the mothering that they got, has to do intergenerationally. It's a cycle that gets passed on. And unless we catch it and identify it and kind of work to combat it a little bit, it passes from one generation to the other. It's not seen as being abusive, it's just seen as kind of normal, by the people in it. Mhm.
So in as we do this tonight, we're not looking to beat up mom. All right. We all love our moms, all right? And so in this process of trying to unpack, kind of what happened in my childhood, all right,
Yes.
which we might go into a little later, as by the way,
Yes.
uh, and how this relationship came about, uh, as we have as in our heading, uh, uh, in the toxic environment of mom. That sounds pretty brutal, all right. And so
It
this
does.
exploration hopefully will bring us to a more understanding and loving appreciation of both what perhaps mom went through, as you point out, in her childhood or her mother's childhood, that
Yes.
these things might help us become even more loving with our great moms.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's both. I think the love and the empathy and the compassion, we do get there, but initially you're looking, and your task, if you will, is to look at your childhood through the lens of the teaching, on mother wound and other things, and to say to yourself or to somebody else, as I've shared on the podcast, this is what happened to me when I was a child. In other words, it's looking back and looking at what may have happened to you. And the purpose of that is so that we can connect the dots, and it can help us explain, it can help us understand why we are like we are now in terms of the decisions that we made, and sometimes in terms of the feelings that we still have that trigger us, that kind of set us off, different things from our childhood. And then, of course, the relationship with mom, even if mom has passed on, you know. The
Yeah.
relationship is something you carry within you. The mother doesn't have to be present. And the good thing about that is, same way with the healing, um, people have, I think, a misconception like you have to go to someone and tell them everything that they did wrong. And sometimes there is a place for that truthfulness and that honesty face to face if the other person is open. But if they're not open, or if it would injure them or hurt them, you can be healed of the mother wound without the mother being around. And that's a beautiful thing, because the healing isn't what happened. That's already happened. You can't go back and change that. The healing is what you carry as a result of what happened, and what you do with the feelings and the memories that you carry within you.
All right. Very good. And so now, as we take Mary as a mother, all right,
Yes.
and just as a quick overview, again,
Yes.
very much in the divine will and the Virgin Mary, she asks us, tells us
Yes.
that
Many
she's
times.
there for us. All right.
Yes, she does.
How would that play into what we're going to be doing?
And this is what's interesting in terms of the intersection, the interplay between our spiritual journey and what happened to us as children with a caregiver. Now, the mother wound, too, doesn't have to be your biological mother. It can be any caregiver that took the place, if you will, was a mother figure to you. So it can be a grandparent, an adopted parent, a single dad, even can create a mother wound if they're taking the place of the mother. So it's really from the person that you were hoping to get that nurturing, that sense of safety, that love, that sense of security from, and it just wasn't there the way it needed to be. So that's what happens with the mother wound. Now, in terms of our spiritual journey, really interesting. Couple things here. One is the catechism. CCC 239, right, talks specifically, they say, the mother and father we had were fallible and can disfigure our concept of motherhood and fatherhood. And they're saying that not to bash motherhood or fatherhood. Why they're saying that is, and I'll put it in my own words, they're saying that because they they want you to understand that the Father in heaven, and Mary too for that matter, isn't an extension of your early caregivers. The early caregivers are our first representatives of what God is like, of what the Father's like, of what the Mother's like. And where we get stuck, and this is everybody, this is every person, you have that early upbringing, and your mom and your dad and your caregivers are really how you form your image of God, how you form your thoughts about who He is, what He's going to do, what's His relationship to you, all of that. It gets formed in that environment. And if the mother and father are wounded or broken, and many other things that you can be that create this, we don't get a real clear picture of who God is and who Mary is. And as I was thinking about this talk in particular, looking at the mother room, I was thinking we have a real paradox here. And that is that our first image and our first experience with our own mother also shapes and forms and predisposes us or closes us sometimes to look at the Blessed Mother as our mother. And I see that as a real barrier. It's the same way, it's analogous to if we had a father that we had a very, very difficult relationship with, it's really difficult to see God as being different. We project onto deity the behavior and the actions of our early caregivers. So
Well,
if there is
I
abuse
can
there.
relate to that. I relate to that myself.
Mhm,
As much as
mhm.
I believe and love our Blessed Mother, all right, I also found that my ability to connect to her as mother um,
Yes. Yes.
evades me, okay? And it's not
Yes.
because of any disposition or either lack of belief or lack of
No.
desire, all right?
No.
But just connecting the dots, they just didn't connect, all right? And on
Connecting.
the other hand, I know of many people who perhaps because they had trouble having a mom, that
Yes.
they could relate to, the Blessed Mother came to their rescue, right? And was able to heal and seal that gap in them. How
Mhm.
did that happen? All right.
So, well, interestingly enough, it's the same way it happens with the Father and with Jesus, that even people that have been in very, very difficult environments where you think, how are they ever going to see God as good, given that they had all this abuse? You don't understand that connection, but God can transcend that. He can work above that. We're talking about the normal way that we do it, or I should say, a normal way we do it is to see those good things in our mother and father and think, okay, if they're that good, then God is at least that good, maybe more. It's supposed to be the mother bond with the child and the father bond, for that matter, is supposed to be a preparation so that we can feel secure, feel loved, feel valuable, validated, and then our transition to understanding God the Father and Mary becomes easier. Give you an example. Little Therese, the little flower, of course, being a Carmelite, she's just one of our absolute favorites. She actually said in a poem, she said that when she looked at her father's face, she saw the reflection of heaven, that as she looked at her father, for her it was a reflection of heaven. And I thought of that when I read that. I thought how beautiful on the one hand, but how I think how very rare that is in our common experience. Most of us, I've never heard anybody say that, right? So
Yeah.
probably fairly rare in our common experience, but that is the transition. And the paradox in this is just what you said, that the mother womb makes it hard for us not to connect with Mary mentally, to say, okay, she's Jesus's mother. I love her. I honor her. But to connect with her emotionally, meaning to see her in your heart as someone that actually is nurturing you and loving you and protecting you and connected to your emotions, like that she actually cares about every little thing that happens to us, the way that those of us, mothers and fathers for that matter, care about what happens to our own children. And one of the things she says in the book of the Virgin Mary book, the kingdom, is she says, you know, everybody can relate to this, that she loves to see her child happy. And she goes, what mother doesn't love? It's the greatest joy. She put it this is greatest joy to see your child happy. And when I read that, I thought, how interesting. That's so relatable. Because I remember when my son was very young and he'd be in his room, he'd be humming. He wasn't singing, but he was humming theme songs, right? And I remember being in the other room and just sitting there and hearing him humming, and just this wonderful feeling of knowing that your child for that moment was safe and happy and content. Humming usually can mean that, like singing. And so
So
I
you
thought
felt
of
that.
that when I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful. And but
Now,
then, to believe that she believes that about us. See what I mean? The
yeah.
emotional connection.
Now you bring up the little flower, okay, and you
Mhm,
bring up her
mhm.
relationship with her dad and how
Yes,
she felt connected to God. And
yes.
and I recall from her stories that, she loved her mother, and she would hear these stories of heaven that were so beautiful that,
Mhm.
at one point when she was just little, very little, uh, she turned to her mom and said, "Oh, mom, I can't wait for you to die and go to
Yes.
heaven." Right?
Yes.
Which is, alarming.
She
When you
did.
understand the great anticipation of the glory that she was thinking for her mom. And ironically,
Exactly.
her mom did die when she
Her
was
mom
very
did
young.
die. Yes,
And
it's
and
from
even though Our Lady seemed to be a part of a great healing for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Our Lady smiled from the statue, right?
Mm-hmm.
She still had a mother wound, didn't she, throughout her
Yes.
life?
Oh my goodness. And very, very deep. And that was from the loss of a mother, which also comes under the category of mother wound. It's not defined quite as much because the mother wasn't there to actually do things. It's just you lost your mother. So that becomes a deep grieving. And I know people who were raised without a mother. My mother in law lost her mother at age 8. And I know people who were raised like that, and they feel this emptiness when they see other people with their mothers and mother-daughter, mother-son relationships. There's this grieving and this emptiness and this real sense of when I say not being normal like other kids. It's a fairly deep wound. Also, people who have lost their mother and their father in childhood have a little higher risk for depression later on in life. So it
Right,
actually does impact some people pretty
right.
deeply.
Now, even starting there, again, as we bring this extraordinary grace of how in the divine will, um, the same divine will that Our Lady, our spiritual mom, right,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
was able in her to experience the very presence of God and Jesus within her, the indwelling Trinity within her.
Mhm.
Um, how does the divine will and this relationship to our moms impact and help us through all these wounds and you'll be talking about various kinds of
Yes.
wounds.
Yes.
What's the pattern that the divine will would have,
Okay. I
right?
don't know if I would say a pattern yet. I haven't seen a pattern that maybe applies generally, but I've seen trends and bullet points that lead to a certain direction. And one of them is in the Virgin Mary book. She talks about a couple of things. First of all, she's always saying multiple times, that her happiness would be us to hand over our human will to her so that she can basically emerge it in the divine will. And she talks about, too, in this book, that the divine will, and I'll put it in my own words, that the divine will progressively reigns in your soul. It's the reign of God in our soul. So the divine will progressively reigns. And in that reigning, it is pushing out the dark thoughts, it's pushing out the self, it's pushing out the wounds in some way, it's giving them light and transforming them in your interior. And what she was saying is the more we look to the divine will and the more the divine will is reigning, the less that darkness is reigning. So I looked at that. That was one of the things I thought. It's like what she's saying is is what we probably have thought about before now, and that is that the more you're looking toward the light, the more you're looking toward the Holy Spirit and the divine will to live in you, to think in you, to act in you, to everything, to breathe in you, to move in you, all of it, the less space there is to give the thoughts, not of what happened to you, but the thoughts of bitterness, the thoughts of grief, the thoughts of unforgiveness, the thoughts that do harm us. It's not harmful to know what happened to you necessarily. What's harmful is the result oftentimes of knowing those things and dwelling on them is the bitterness and the unforgiveness, and they dump unhealthy toxic chemicals into our body. In other words, interiorly, when we are focused on negative, there are bad hormones that are being released rather than hormones that are healthy, that lead us in a healthy way. So even on a physical level, it's not a good thing. The other thing with Mary that she says, which pretty amazing, is she says, give me your will, because then she wants to give it to Jesus, the divine will. And what you will find is the work that will happen within you that you couldn't have done with you, it would have taken years for you to do. You can do, will be done in a day. I mean, that's just verbatim. She puts will be done in a day. I had to read that a few times, like, is this a misprint? Is this is this really an accurate translation? But what that tells me is what you and I, Larry, had already intuited as we were talking about this. We're not sure all the all the steps yet, and the clarity that maybe we'll have going forward, but we know that somewhere in this there is also an exponential way of growing, that God is giving us something in this divine will that is not just speeding up our growing, something that would take years taking a day, but not just speeding it up, but the quality of it. The growing is taking the negative and processing it, identifying it, recognizing it, talking about it, and then it gets transformed, as you said earlier, it gets transformed into a deeper understanding of our mother and our situation growing up, deeper understanding of ourself. So you have an inroad for self compassion. You start to realize what it is you suffered and what it is you had to survive. So that's why you did what you did growing up. It doesn't exonerate sin or sin patterns. I'm not going in that direction, but I'm saying it gives you a compassion for those patterns that we all fall into when we have deep wounds. We all fall into sin patterns when we have deep wounds, because that's what deep wounds does. It distorts our thinking. It gives us an addictive flavor. We want to grab things. We're hungry for love. We're hungry for security, whatever it is. And when you're hungry, that hungry, you make mistakes in judgment. Yeah. So we've all done that.
So our Mama Mary, all right, in the divine will is going to make it all better, help the dire effects of what happened to us in our history,
Yes.
and help those heal and become whole. But there's this other dimension that is unique, that the divine will, for me at least, revealed,
Yeah.
that Our Lady, as a mom, wants, like all mothers would want, not just for us to adore her, worship her, honor her, and love her as a mom, and have her on a pedestal, right? But that she wants to share with us everything she has, so
Yes.
that we can experience it all in the divine will with her, all right? In
Yeah.
her court, if you wish, as kings
Exactly.
and queens of her court. What a great mom image that is to me. Of
Mm,
every mom wants their kids to do better, but no one's ever going to do better than the Blessed Mother, right?
exactly. Exactly. But I think, it's almost like in us as mothers, the maternal instinct to want to
Yeah.
give your child more than you had. And as I was thinking about our family, my family, and the different people, I was thinking, I think every mom that I know gave their child more than they had. And the reason is because they didn't have very much. So if you just improved it a little, you gave them more. A lot of
Right.
people have had very difficult, mother wounds. And also the mother wound can be there also with the father wound and all kinds of other trauma. So we're going from people who have been severely battered and hurt, and that's at one end of the spectrum, to people that have had a difficult relationship with mom, but they're working it out. There's some unforgiveness, there's some tension, whatever, but it's not ruling our lives in the present as much.
Okay, so now we know that, in the Virgin Mary, Our Lady says that she wants us all similar to herself. And the
Mm,
only thing that is not similar that she wants us to know is that we have in us the divine will as she does. Okay. And so that we can be just like her, which is just that beautiful image of mom that you just talked about.
yes, yes.
And yet we know that this great gift of the divine will has only been around a short time. And so not only do our moms perhaps have stories of their childhood that have woeful stories that we need to know and understand,
Oh, yes,
but that
yes.
they didn't have the access to the divine will either, right? And so there was like a double problem for them to try and mother, right? And so as we now start to explore some of those problems or difficulties, unresolved areas that perhaps my mom's mom and your mom's mom and all moms had. Uh, Talk about those kinds of situations and their implications for the ability to mother. Okay.
Mhm. And and that is really what happens, as I was looking at everything on the mother room. What kept hitting me more and more, my own thought, they didn't use this word, but I'm thinking of profound brokenness. This is intergenerational. This is your own mother didn't get mothering, so she didn't know how to mother you. That's what it is. And you probably did some of those same things to your child, um, not knowing. The patterns just continue again, unless they're identified and caught, they just continue. I think that the beautiful thing about our mothers and our mothers' mothers is they didn't have access to the divine will like we have. That's a great gift for this time, but they did have access to Mary as a mother, and could pray the rosary, could be devoted to her. Many people, are just devoted to Mary. And it seems to me that if you're devoted to Mary, whether or not you had access and even knew about these gifts, these things that she's talking about in terms of sharing her maternal tenderness, sharing her love, sharing her care, I think that she would she would want to and be willing, more than willing, to share that with people that have a devotion to her. So they had something, they just didn't have the writings and the advantages, as you were pointing out, that we have by really knowing in detail and hearing through the book of the Virgin Mary, hearing Mary say these things. You see?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have that. There's a lot of avenues for brokenness. Um, I'll just share quickly about very little about my own mother, and that is our brokenness, our difficult relationship was that she had a family before she married my father. Her first husband died, and she had 3 children in that family. And she lost 2 sons. She had a daughter and 2 sons. My sister, the one that survived, 16 years older than me. So we never lived as sisters. She was out of the home. But what happened is my mother mentally almost got frozen in time in that trauma that she had, losing 2 of her sons and losing her husband, and then marrying my dad later. So what happened is she could take care of me physically, but she couldn't she wasn't emotionally available. She wasn't attuned to me. um, like she would say to people, "Oh, I have 3 children." She would say to the people, and I would say, "Mom, I'm you have me, that's 4." She goes, "Oh, you came later," just like that, like like I shouldn't care about being counted. You came later. But it was much deeper than that. She was really wounded and stayed most of her life kind of in the shock of all that, and couldn't adjust to having me as a child. She said, like as an example, when my sister, she said she sent her to all kinds of lessons and dancing and this and that, and she never sent me to anything. And I think what happened is it's like she did it all, it didn't work out because she lost her children, 2 of her children. And so then when she had me, I think she just emotionally was on a different plane. It wasn't malicious, it wasn't intentional, but it was really there, and it was there pretty much the whole time until maybe a few weeks before she died. That started to change a little bit. Yeah.
You know, as you to describe again the situation that our moms come from, all right,
Yes.
and their challenges in experiencing or mothering us.
Yes.
I'm also thinking about the effects that those would have on us, and even knowing whether or not we are experiencing uh,
Mhm,
mother wounds in us. What would
mhm.
signs of of the kind of situation that perhaps you described? Mine, I had a similar kind of experience for my
Yeah.
mom's experience. What would be some signs that we would look for in ourselves to know
Mhm.
whether these wounds have uh, created things that we're not even aware of, or we're just peripherally aware in our
Yeah.
relationships or in our
Mhm.
attitude about ourselves? All right.
Some are more hidden and kind of silent and unconscious, and some are more conscious. I'll give you an example. Her not being there emotionally, I think, left me with a real intense need for an attachment, to be loved, to feeling like you are loved like nobody else is loved. We all want to feel that way. We all want to be that. And I didn't have it. I was more peripheral in my family. She wasn't outwardly abusive so much as just let me do what I wanted, even though I was real little, let me go out all day playing with kids when I was like 4 and 5, not calling me, not watching over. In other words, anything could have happened. And she was just more or less okay with that somehow. She wasn't able emotionally, she wasn't able to be a mother because she had just lost one of her sons, her older son. She lost one as a baby and one at age 16. So she just was not there. But I remember when I was growing up, one of the covenants, we make covenants and promises to ourselves. And I know I did this. When I saw my mother was not able to protect me from my father who drank. Okay. She wasn't able to control him or set any limits. She just wasn't. So every weekend, not during the week so much, that was all right, but every weekend in our house was really not so good. It was just me, my mother, and my father drank, and he became verbally abusive. Not so much physically, but verbally. And I remember I used to hear this time after time, for years. And I used to hear this, and I had a few promises. One was just an interior promise. I looked at my mother as being weak and my father as being abusive to her. And I thought, I never, I never want to put myself at the mercy of a man. And it was ever. When I grow up, I have to be able to take care of myself or something because I don't want to be in this situation where you're at the mercy of somebody who is out of control. And then the other thing I did too, and this was really so amazing. I was very young. I don't even remember how old I was. And my father was raging, verbally raging at night, and came in my room and just scared me to death, didn't touch me or anything, but it just frightened me to death. So I was laying in my bed and tears were just rolling down my face just for the tension of it all. And I prayed to the Lord, and I said to him, and I think I shared this on my testimony. I said, Lord, I know that this is how it's going to be for me as a child. In other words, this is what we have. But when I get older and when I get married, can you give me somebody that's not at all like my father? That's what I said.
Well, God
It's just
certainly
a
answered
prayer for
that
a
prayer, right?
child.
You kn
He did.
you not only married a Joseph, he was very much like a Saint Joseph, and what a wonderful man he is, I can attest to
Very
that.
good to me. Yes. Yes.
Alright, so you experienced this, caution, this, sense of need for safety that you were able to
Yes.
articulate, which I think is extraordinary. A lot of our symptoms of having been wounded is we
Yes.
don't necessarily recognize what happened or why, and we
Yeah.
don't understand the effects that happen to us. I have
Exactly.
one here, uh, that someone has written in that I can show, right? And, and
Okay.
in it, it talks about guilt, how this individual says, "I often find myself defending myself with inner accusations which I know nothing about." In other words, I find myself saying, "I didn't do it,"
Right.
whatever I'm being
Right.
accused of.
Right.
And but this
Exactly.
and I can there's something I recognize too. That's like
Yes.
feeling guilty if somebody says, "Did you do that?" And I say, "No," but somehow I feel like I'm lying and that I
Mhm,
did, and it just
mhm.
doesn't make any sense. So that symptom there, right?
Yes.
What would you read
Yeah.
into
In
how
in a to
what was happening? Yeah.
yeah, in a toxic, abusive environment, nobody comes out to you and says, "Hey, it's me. I'm just a bad person. That's why I'm doing this." What they do instead is they blame you. They blame the child, and the child doesn't know um, how to process that. So the child begins to think on the inside, "I must be bad." When your parents are abusive and you're really little, you never say, "Oh, they're mean, abusive people." You never do that. A child can't do that. What they do is they take it in and they say, "I must be bad. There's something wrong with me." And so, as you're being accused of things you didn't do or saying, "It's your fault, this, that, whatever," in that environment, you're just taking it in and taking it in. And that's what I was talking about, carrying that wound. We lose sight of where it even came from, and sometimes it comes to us before we're even verbal, so we don't have a way of processing and even articulating. It's pre-verbal. It's before you could talk, before you could process things. So then you're left with carrying this sense of, you're taking what you heard, even if you don't remember what you heard, and you're repeating that pattern. So you feel safe, and there's a safety in it. You feel really safe saying, "Oh, okay, I did this, or I didn't really do it, but oh, I'm really sorry. I really apologize." And you feel guilty. And that feeling, which is interesting, is called like a nest. You're going back to the home, you're going back to the nest because it's a comfortable feeling, something you got that reminds you of home, kind of a comforting feeling, but it's not a healthy thing to do, obviously, moving forward. So you get stuck in that. You get stuck in that place where you are taking your early toxic environment and you're recreating it inside. And this is normal. This is what we do. And then our self-talk, that's what you're telling yourself over and over. Now let me share too, if I can go back for a minute and say some of the other things that the mother room really, really encapsulates, because I think a lot of our viewers would be able to relate to just a few of these larger categories. I'll be really quick with it. One is invalidating, meaning, "Oh, you can't feel like that. What do you mean you're doing that? Why are you, that kind of thing." Where the mother isn't validating your feelings, not validating your identity, your growth, your personhood. You're not getting affirmed. And instead of getting affirmed, you're getting overly criticized. Um, One definition of the mother room is someone there is demeaning, minimizing you, and constantly criticizing you, right? And that also can make you, well, what happens then when you grow up and you get in touch with it is you find yourself constantly criticizing yourself. You find yourself talking to yourself like, "Oh, you did that. We always do that. Oh, you're never going to do it," that kind of thing. And you're saying it to yourself. So nobody can really get in there and even hear it sometimes unless they ask you about it and you can be in touch with it, because it's an internal dialogue, right? So that's the other core thing, that invalidation, emotionally unavailable, critical, not being in tune with the child so that they don't know what they think after a while, because your thoughts and your ability to make meaning of things has been invalidated. We make meaning of everything from when we're very little. Children make meaning about what's going on in their environment. Well, if you're making that meaning and your mom or your dad or both are telling you that you're crazy and it's not that way, then you don't know where to go with that, because then you don't have any meaning. You don't know how to put things together. I remember when I was a
Yeah.
child, if I was sensitive about something, something would happen and I would pick up on it. I'd be very sensitive. I was a sensitive child. I would be punished for being sensitive. So it also makes you feel like your feelings and your sense of reality and what you're seeing isn't real. Like there's something wrong with you. I'm seeing this, but everybody else is telling me no. See how that works?
Wow, that's a violation on a profound level, an ontological level, if you wish, that your
Yes,
very identity is being,
yes,
invalidated,
yes,
that you're wrong on some level that is
mm-hmm.
fundamentally who and what you are. It sounds
Absolutely.
like shame, right?
It goes
That
very
when
deep. Yeah, it
yeah.
goes very deep, and it is shaming. Probably the most, how can I say, discreet or profound experience I had like that is I was my mother and father left me at my aunt's when I was young, and they were traveling and they were in an accident and they were gone for months and months. So I was there with this other family. I mean, I was related to them, but another family. And one of the people in that family, again, it's just like a mother figure. We lived with her. And one time I was sitting at the kitchen table. I was only about maybe 9 or 10, maybe 11. I don't remember. It's kind of fuzzy. But I was sitting at the kitchen table and I was just sort of staring like this, not really thinking anything. And there was a calendar on the wall. So my cousin, this is cousin, she came in, she's deceased now. She came in and she said, "You're thinking about your birthday," and blah, blah, blah. And she was mad at me for thinking about my birthday because the calendar must have put June up there. And I wasn't thinking about my birthday. I remember I was just sort of like zoning out. Right? And I told her, no, I wasn't. And she just got very, very upset. And it was like, wow, I always remember that because I remember one is I wasn't even thinking about my birthday. But what if I was? I was a little kid. What if I was thinking about my birthday? That would have been okay too. So it was like a double whammy. It was like you're getting punished for something that would have been normal, but you didn't even do that. And that really, that's what I mean by the invalidating. She was taking just my ability to even think, or what if I was wishing that, and she was criticizing and invalidating it, right? And so that that was amazing. That left me. It was a lot of years ago, and that left me with just, I always remember that because it was so discreet. It was like perfectly not right. And I knew that, but I couldn't, I don't know if I could have articulated that at the time.
All right, so I can see where there can be many little versions of that
Yes.
same kind of story that could have been experienced in any variety of not just mom, but my oversensitivity or my neediness for
Mhm,
that, the
mhm.
unmet needs that can come out of that, all of that we talk about in those areas. Okay,
Yes.
but I'm also wondering about the sense of uh, loyalty that can confound even our experience of that, how we
Oh,
don't allow ourselves to feel invalidated out
mhm,
of, uh, I mean, there's our mom. There's no one like
mhm,
them, right?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
What
there's
kind of
something called,
confusion can that bring? Yeah.
yeah, a lot. There's something called traumatic bonding, and this happens when the trauma and when the abuse is quite serious. So we're going over to that other end now and saying when it's really, really serious. And what this is that you get bonded to your abusers in a very ambivalent way. So if you're in a situation, saying your mother was abusive, she was probably abused and she passed that on to you, right? And let's say she was very abusive, you might end up with this ambivalence that loves her in one way because she's your mom. Children are programmed. they're they're predisposed to love their parents and to want to bring value and blessing to their parents and be a blessing to their parents. And so you're loving her in that way, but then you have that there's abuse, deep abuse, so you have this sense of anger and resentment. It's really anger, even more than resentment. You get very, very angry at what's happening, but you can't express it at all. What I've seen happen in those situations is so amazing. Is like let's say that that mother then dies, all right? And so you're out of the abuse and you think, okay, I'm out of the abuse. You can't abuse me anymore. It's all over. It's not over. You can take that traumatic bonding, honestly, and live out what your mom would have wanted you to do if she had continued living. It's like it's a traumatic bond. You are close to that person in a way that's hard to explain. And at the same time, you want to get away from them. And when they were living, you wanted to get away from them. That's called a traumatic bonding. And it leaves people with a lot of ambivalence and they don't know. This is what I've really noticed is when people are acting out that traumatic bonding or even a less degree of that traumatic bonding, they are not always aware of where that came from. They just think that it's just right to be, loyal to their parents and this kind of thing and do what their parents would have wanted them to do, even if they have died. They just think that they don't understand that it's a loyalty bond, that it's a traumatic bonding. And a loyalty bond means you are loyal because you're putting, say, with the mother wound, you are loyal to the mother because you're putting her needs and her wants and her feelings above your own, and you're sacrificing your own to meet hers because that's what you learned when you were growing up in this situation where she was emotionally unavailable and you were not validated. So you're learning in that situation. One of the scenarios that you learn is to take care of mom, to not do anything to upset her, and that continues on. As you grow up, that can continue on. And that's part of what the abuse does to you. It programs you. It makes you feel like if you don't do that, that you're a bad daughter or a bad son. And that's what I mean by programs you. And there are a
So
lot of scenarios like that. Yeah.
so unless you're tracking down this dysfunctional lifestyle that you felt your mom kind of programmed you for, right? Unless you are moving that way, you don't feel right about yourself. That
Yes.
somehow wrong becomes the right of your
Hmm.
life.
Hmm. Yes,
And now
because I'm
this is
sorry. Go
a
ahead.
mystery. There's a mystery in
Yes.
this because
Oh,
uh,
yes.
there's a goodness underneath the suffering here in the love of mom that
Hmm.
that almost makes this into some sort of redemptive suffering of a strange and twisted nature, right?
It's very
From God's
strange.
perspective, if you wish,
Yeah.
the little child in you
Mhm.
has remained very little and
Mhm.
doesn't really know what it's doing
Right.
except to obey this wrong
Right.
advice, this wrong uh, idea of love, idea of you, right?
Exactly.
That's very strange, and I don't know if you're you're prepared to go into that one, but that's
Yeah.
a real paradox, isn't it?
It's a real paradox, and you're right. There's goodness in everybody, and it comes out even these in these situations. The thing about the mother wound, if it's very severe, if you had a really difficult time with your mother, that wound, until it's identified, until it's healed, until you get some soothing and some relief from it, and some understanding of what it was and how it impacted you, that relationship will be your primary relationship and it will bleed out on every other relationship. And what I mean by this is, in a true sense, and I have seen this played out multiple times, right? In a true sense, if somebody is hooked in to the abuse, even the traumatic bond, hooked in that way, or hooked in by being angry or unforgiving or bitter, um, all of the above, right? You're hooked in, and that becomes your primary relationship. So then when you have other relationships, even though they should be like husband children, they should be closer, they aren't. You're still being moved and driven by this relationship that was not resolved. And the irony with that is, your mom, in terms of how she treated you, oftentimes, with the brokenness, is being moved by unprocessed trauma in her own life. That was my mom. She was being moved by unprocessed trauma. She was like how can I say, an incredible person in many, many, many ways, an incredible person that I look up to, but it doesn't negate, it doesn't change that when I was little, she was moved by that unprocessed trauma herself. That was what triggered her. That's where she lived interiorly.
Yeah. Now, this unfinished business, this unresolved
Mm-hmm,
relationship with mom that
mm-hmm,
that now kind of is rolling down the generational trail and reproducing
mm-hmm.
itself again. When I look at that as a guy, I think of that old song, "I Want a Gal Just Like the Gal That Married Your Old Dad," right? So if I experienced mothering on that level,
Oh my.
I would be attracted to a
Oh
mother,
my.
just like you
Oh yeah.
say,
Oh
just
yes.
so familiar,
Oh my
so
goodness.
familiar.
Well, yeah, that story, and this is the other thing where I really recognize myself. Uh, I dated a lot of guys before I married Joseph, and I probably wouldn't have. I probably wouldn't have had a successful marriage with any of them. I did not choose well. You know? I
Well,
cannot say I chose well. I think this was divine intervention with my
and
husband.
that's I guess the next point is
Yeah.
just as a man might be attracted to a mother that was like that, wouldn't the woman be attracted to a man who would let her be that way? All right, who would be
Um,
looking for that kind of, in a sense, abuse.
with again, it really varies because there are so many diverse wounds. But one of the symptoms that they talk about is women tend to not be healthy in their boundaries and their choice of relationships, and they choose partners oftentimes that are what we call wounding. In other words, somebody to wound them again because unconsciously that is safe. If you're in a situation where the other person is mistreating you, that feels safe because that's how you were raised, or where the other person can't connect to you, it feels safe. And that's a big dynamic. In other words, there's a true part of us that gravitates back to what was comfortable. And comfortable isn't always good, but comfortable is something that reminds you of when you were small, that going back to the womb, so to speak. And so it's an unconscious process. And the boundary issues are big, the low self-esteem issues are big. um, Many other specific issues. You don't know exactly who you are. You have trouble with your identity because you haven't learned to identify and manage your emotions. So you have emotional dysregulation, is what we call it. You don't know how you feel. Somebody has to help you figure out how you feel, because when you were learning about how do I feel and can I trust myself, the environment did not allow you to speak out how you felt. That's number one. You can't speak out, especially negative things. Can't speak it out in these classic homes, right? The toxic mother room, classic home. So you're not testing it. You're not seeing who you are and what thoughts are yours and what feelings are yours. You're just not able to do that. So then when you grow up, you honestly don't know deep who you are. You don't know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, then you can't set boundaries. If you don't know who you are, you limit what you think you can do in this life. In other words, your goals. It impacts a lot of your life, a lot of your area, the different areas, if you do not have a sense of what what you're feeling from moment to moment and can trust that. And women that come from the environments with the mother room, they have difficulty trusting in relationships, and real difficulty, of course, with intimacy. And the men choose women. And again, this is an overstatement, this is a general statement, but the men, it's not it's not unlikely for the man to choose a woman that he can't please, and then he'll keep trying to please her, keep trying to get love from somebody that just doesn't have it to give or doesn't want to give it. And that's the pattern that can kind of cycle, right?
All right, excellent. All right, so now we're coming to the top of the hour now. Okay, and I'm so grateful that you're able to share so much from your life, which I find very compelling, and desire to kind of share a little bit of my experience as well. Right?
Yes, yes.
And so, what I would ask for as we do these, in a sense, mock. um Moments of helping, of healing, for me, spiritual direction, for you, working with inner
Yeah,
wounds.
the role
Um,
play. Yeah.
these are role playings that are meant to help instruct, all right?
Yes,
Meant
yes.
to help you identify, perhaps in your own lives, for things
Oh,
that
yes.
our wounds are pretty universal, all right? Um,
Mhm.
Everything that everyone has, we have within ourselves, right? And
Amen.
sometimes as we hear others share, we recognize pieces of us there as well, right?
Absolutely.
And
Mhm.
how valuable that is. But I'd like for you to, in a sense, share with me. And hello, Patricia. Hi, welcome.
Hello. We have a couple of gentlemen that are backstage
Oh,
and that
really?
perhaps may want to go
Okay.
ahead and participate. So,
Ah,
when you're in full
excellent.
screen, you might not have been able to see that there
Oh,
are some
well,
people
I
there.
would be glad to give up my place in the hot seat. And and I see we have both Patrick, and Patrick is we've wonderful. We've had you have the chance with us before, but I also see
Mhm.
Mr. Steve, all right, who's also in the wings here. And I'm wondering if we might be able to let Steve have an opportunity tonight to come on board and then have a chance to share. Okay, and uh, and Steve, if you're up for it, Patricia, why don't you bring Steve in, and I'm
Okay,
going
Steve's in.
to hop out so that Steve and Lois can have some time together. How's that sound?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Oh, before I lose my nerve. Hi, Dr.
Hello.
Hi.
Why can't I hear you real good? Steve, can you speak up just a little? I can hear you, but it's not real good. I'm not sure why.
Okay, can you hear me?
No, for some reason,
No?
now it's kind of skipping. It's like I'll hear you and then it skips. I'm not sure what's happening there.
Steve, just be
Oh.
bold in your speaking. If you have anything else going on, turn it off, disconnect it. Just speak clearly, and Dr. Lois will be able to hear you.
Yeah. Well, maybe the connection. Can you hear me now?
A little bit. Yeah, I hear you a little bit better.
All right. Well, how do we begin here? You can't
So
hear me?
basically, let me jump in with Lois here because I can hear you very well, Steve. Okay. All right. And what we'd like to know is how did you experience what we were talking about in terms of this wounding, mother wound, all right, your experience as a child, all right?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to know where to begin. You know, you made a lot of sense. I mean, my mother wasn't overcritical, but she was kind of over smothering, and
Yeah.
and and in a way, it wasn't. It was kind of nice, but as I got older, it got to be a little bit too much, and the smothering wasn't physical necessarily. It was more emotional because I was a kid who was pretty sensitive and pretty deep. I always felt out of place because I was at a deeper level than most of my friends, definitely a deeper level than my father. So I kind of, she sort of got that emotional support for me. because she couldn't really get it from my dad because
Wow.
he didn't. And I didn't really have a great relationship with my dad. I mean, he was abusive, but more so he just wasn't there. He didn't really play with us. He was always working. When I was a kid, I was really good at baseball and I wanted to be a baseball player, but he never practiced with me. So when I went to try out, I always, got really nervous and anxious and never made the team. So that was a bummer, but but in neighborhood games, I was always a star. So, I was talking to Larry before in our sessions, and and I did go to therapy a lot when I was in my late 20s. I had a really good psychiatrist, believe it or not, who actually did therapy and not just drugs. And she helped me understand the relationship I had with my mother and how it was just too much. It was too much for me. It was nice, but there's also the factor that my aunt, who is still alive, my mother's passed away. Both my parents have passed away. I'm 64 now. But my aunt thinks that my mother was bipolar, actually. And or maybe even borderline, I don't know, because she could be very sweet, lovely, all those things. We'd have long talks and we'd have deep talks, and I think she really, it was good for me, but I think it was good for her, but it was still inappropriate, which I understood in therapy. I learned to understand. But of course, when I got older, she still wanted that relationship, and I suddenly became very angry with her, almost abusive with her. I treated her very badly, and I couldn't understand why. And also, I was never successful in relationships because I was too much too soon. I'm a very sensual person and also a very deep person, and I think that scared a lot of women away. So I thought I would never be happy. I mean, the one thing I wanted in my life was, to be married and have a family. And so finally, I did meet someone, and we ended up getting married. And then we were married for 22 years.
Wow.
And we have two daughters. They're 27 and 25 now. But around 2014, my wife was seduced and descended into the New Age in a big way. And her personality changed. She got very psychologically abusive, and she was very psychologically abusive to my oldest daughter, Eliza. And in 2000, and she kind of made Eliza the scapegoat that sort of detracted from her secretive activities in the New Age. And it just wasn't dabbling in it, it was deep in it. I didn't know it at the time. But anyway, long story short, she apostatized. We were both Catholic. I mean, we didn't get married in the church, but we did get our marriage convalidated. And I guess she wanted the easy way. I guess as my relationship with the Lord grew stronger, it threatened her. And she found happiness. I don't want to say happiness. She found power and control in this New Age thing. So it was just very traumatic. She went away on this New Age retreat for the weekend, and when you're married to someone for that long, you know who your spouse is. And she came home, I just didn't know who she was. She talked the same, she acted the same, but she had this preternatural energy that I've never seen before. Well, long story short, a few weeks after that, and by the way, she did that on Father's Day weekend, and she announced she didn't want to be married anymore, and she never should have been married. It wasn't me. She was happy with me. I was a great father. I was a great husband. I worked so hard on our marriage. I worked so hard for her. In such a short period of time. Do you remember did you ever watch the movie Gone Girl, the Ben Affleck movie? It's about this narcissistic woman. It's interesting because someone just reminded me about that movie, and
Okay.
yeah.
And so she left, right?
She left, but it was like she not only left, she just no, she didn't leave. It was just I refused to, agree to it, and for I don't know, 5 months, it was just psychological, physical abuse beyond. It was like she became a psychopath, and so long story short, she it's been 10 years, and I could go on for days, but
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, my.
but I guess I thought.
Well,
go on, Larry. What were you gonna say?
yeah, I just want to bring Dr. Lois in. So you're tracking. Can you hear all of what Steve is sharing?
Right? Yeah, I can hear. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. How would you redirect this into the mother wound and what may have been happening for Steve through all of this journey? All right. And I'll pop off again so that you two can just talk. Okay. And kind of see if you can help see some trends and some commonalities between what he was sharing with his mom and perhaps how this has played out for him. All right.
Well, with the mother wound, I had this in my notes in the banner, is oftentimes the mothers, because of their own need, they're emotionally unavailable, but yet might use the daughters to be like their best friends, like best friend forever. That's called parentifying a daughter. And with the son, the literature said that sometimes they use the son, I want to say, a surrogate husband. It's not a physical relationship, but a surrogate meaning someone that you emotionally open up to and talk to and bring them in to your own pain and hurt, say with your own marriage and your own husband. And what happens is the children, especially if there's a few children in the family, the one that is brought in that way at the time feels like, oh, this is a big deal. I'm being honored. I'm special. And then maybe only years later, sometimes years later, they realize just what you were saying. They realize that, no, that wasn't special. Well, in a true sense, it was just inappropriate. And it left me, like the person it's doing it, it left me not learning one of her, first of all, not being able to be a child and grow up and go through the stages the way other children do, but also not learning about how I would interact with peers, because I'm interacting at a more intimate level with my mother, but she's the one who's sharing deeply. So it probably, when children are parentified, they later on do feel oftentimes that anger that they lost their childhood, because you start getting in touch with the grief that, wow, she wasn't taking care of me, I was taking care of her, type of thing. So that's pretty common in the mother room. In the literature, they talk about that, and I've seen that same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's just it's funny because I was when I was talking to Larry, I'm like, I mean, I can relate to all this, but I kind of feel like I healed so much of my childhood wounds. But the trauma I'm still healing from is just
Yeah.
it's just 1,000 times more painful.
More
than
painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
that's,
the
go ahead.
betrayal. I mean, as much as my parents, in some ways, you know, I don't know, maybe betrayal is too strong, but maybe at times there was betrayal out of weakness.
Yeah.
But to be betrayed by your wife of 20, your best friend, and it was really not out of her weakness, it was out of malice. And I mean, you made a point about the bonding with the abuser, I think you said.
The traumatic bonding. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is what my oldest daughter is going through, because she was so angry, and somehow my wife turned her around 180 degrees, because of course she blamed her mother for it, you know. And but the thing is, my daughter, it was just so terrible. I mean, I ended up taking care of her. My wife left. She, you know, my daughter tried to kill herself a few times, and each time my wife was out of town with someone else.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it was but now, you know, my daughter's finally on her own, but she seems to have a good relationship with her mother, much better. And yet my fear for both my daughters is they just buried all this anger, you know. They've never dealt with it. And
Yeah. And Steve, if I could ask, do you have, like, as you think, a very deep, complex story, and as you think of all of it, do you have a specific question that you'd like me to feel before we move on? In other words, did you have like a question that
well,
you
I
can
don't know if I have
articulate?
but the overall, you know, theme of my life is I've always felt like I've been sort of used, you know. And
Mhm.
you know, just kind of kicked to the curb until
Wow.
ever, you know, all the good things that I've done have turned bad. And
Yeah.
you know,
Wow.
not that I'm, you know, I have my faults, of course. I have my addictions, I have my, but even with my daughters, all, you know, the good I've done while my wife was out gallivanting, being a witch and committing adultery, you know, I was in the emergency room with my daughter, not just once, but dozens of times.
Oh, wow.
And
So,
my
we're
daughter
really
used her so much,
a real
you know.
deep pattern here. Yeah, it would seem to me that there's so much on board. You've been through so much. What's happened to you is so deep and so complex that it would make a lot of sense for you to share with somebody on a regular basis. And one of the things I would share with that, I would ask you if I was seeing you. I'm not seeing anybody now, but well, I mean, I'm not taking new people. I am seeing somebody. But what I would ask you to do is to share with them not just what's happened to you, but the distress that you're in right now, the symptoms, the way you're feeling right now, right this moment, because that's what I'm attaching to. In other words, I hear your story, and it's deep, it's long, it's very painful, very painful. But what we can work with, so to speak, is how you are doing right now in terms of your symptomatology, meaning in terms of the things that are interfering with your daily work, or your daily getting up and being able to take care of yourself or interact with people, interact with your daughter, all of that. That's kind of where I see this as needing some light shining on it, and more than light, some someone that can teach you how to reinforce yourself, how to soothe yourself, how to start having goals personally for you. That's called differentiation, where you're not attached to the earlier family anymore. You're realizing that you're separate and you're an adult, and you're creating a new direction, a new life for you, for who you are. Getting in touch with who you are and what that means for today going forward, what your goals are for today. Because I think one of the things, as I hear you, that I would respond to again if I were seeing you, is a balance between looking at the past and what happening to understand it, and getting some good things, some joy, some goals in the present so you can look forward, because looking forward and having hope is very important. One, in order to face your past and grieve your past, but also it's very important to keep on that track going forward, because with the depth of the pain that you've experienced, it would be really easy to go backward and get lost in it. That would be really easy to do.
No,
And I'd like to take this moment too, Steve, and to explore a little bit of what you shared with us, all right, with Lois now, and to just kind of see if we can tie some ends together for you. And I just want to thank you for sharing this story with us so far. And it's a rich and ongoing story, which hasn't even finished yet. But for what we're doing in terms of talking about the kind of pain that this mother wounds can create. Wow. All right. You have won the lottery of pain, right? And so we want to acknowledge that and pray with you.
Yeah, I'm not
for
sharing anybody. Yeah.
woof. All right. It's not
Well,
been
one
easy, not
one
been
of the
good.
things I want to say is, it's been 10 years now, and I have come a long way, and
Yeah.
I mean, the hardest thing is the memories. The hardest thing is looking back. How could have she have done this, But I made a decision 5 years ago that even though my wife wasn't going to be faithful to me or our marriage, that I was going to remain to be faithful to her. So I'm making that commitment, and praying for her and praying for her to just come to senses, and because I mean, she's not bad. She just got deceived, and I honestly believe that she has some sort of demonic oppression or possession that's going on, because nobody changes like that overnight, which she did.
Yeah. And we're praying for her, but for especially we're praying with you for you tonight as well. All right. So thank you, Steve, for this much, and stay tuned as we go on, because we're going to explore this a little deeper. All right, as we let you go, and one again, thank you for sharing so deeply.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
deep pain,
Thank you.
And God bless you, brother. Okay, talk to you
Oh,
soon.
yes. Yes.
All right. Oh my. All right. So devastating mother wounds that have incredible ramifications for our lives.
Oh,
All
they
right.
do.
And this is just so sad. All right. And is there connecting places that you can find in the story that Steve has shared with us as to how the identity has been shifted, and how these in terrible experiences may have actually grown up out of the mother womb, right?
I don't know the details and the
No,
specifics, but suffice it to say, you're
hypothetically,
absolutely right.
hypothetically.
Hypothetically, oh yes, absolutely. Especially when he mentioned that his father was abusive too. It's like, wow, he wouldn't have had a role model to know what it was to be a man, you know? In other words, he had to be a husband and a father, and bless his heart, like he said, he really did that. He really worked at it. But in terms of that background, I'm not sure what messages and came from that early childhood that might still be confusing for him. I don't know. I think that the story's so deep and so complex. I really, really like to see him talk with somebody and again, just go through the symptoms. My concern is, how is he doing day by day? In other words, getting up and just doing your life, doing a day, then doing another day. That's where I would focus. We have to get a feel. Anybody seen him, I think, would have to get a feel for that first. Like, how are you doing? Everything else we have to prioritize and take care of it little by little in terms of identify it, processing it, grieving it. But how he's doing day by day for me would be a real priority, because, as I said, we can go back and look at our wounds, and it is really easy. They have a gravitational pull, to go back there and rehash it and live there. And that's hard. I had the same thing. I know in my own family, there was a gravitational pull to just keep processing that and talking about it. And it took me a while to where I could not talk about it. I would say to my husband, why are they doing this? Why did they do that to me? Why did they do that? And I would just say it. Oh, it seemed like I said it over and over and over, right? Different days over and over. And that grieving process is so deep. It just takes a while, and it varies from person to person, but it takes a while to be able to just share that enough where you actually want to then move on yourself, where you actually feel that, like, I think I have to move on. Let's move on. That self actualization part of us that says, I've got to keep going.
Well, this certainly is a great example for us about how deep these wounds can go and how
Yeah.
difficult it is. It's not subject to a very simple off the top. Well, just do this, just do
No,
that, right?
exactly.
Or just do this prayer, all right? That
Oh,
it
exactly.
doesn't go away so simply, all right?
Oh,
And this is what
absolutely.
you've been saying, that the need for that kind of loving and compassionate, ongoing
Oh,
walk
yes.
through the pain and into that place until the wound has been processed enough that
Exactly.
the clarity starts to come, and with it, the wound begins to heal, right?
Mhm,
And I
mhm,
could see that.
absolutely. And people, with the grief, it's like my feeling when people that are grieving is they need to talk about the person that died, or in this case, the person that left, for until they've come to the end of it. In other words, you can't rush it, you can't cut it off, you can't short circuit it, because there might not be done, and there's something inside of us where we need to get it all out until we've really understood, until we've heard it ourselves, but until we've really understood that another person actually really not just heard our words, but is hearing our heart, is understanding that we're hurting and we're just trying to get that pain out. In other words, I need to tell you the story over and over. That's how I was for my husband. It was like, I need to tell you the story of what my family did over and over, because I'm still hurting so much from it. And I don't, you know the story already. It isn't that you don't know, but what I want you to know is how deep this goes with me. You're really trying to get your heart out there and say, I need another heart to make space for me within their heart, because I'm a person, because I'm a person. And we as people want somebody to hear our story. That connection is very, very inbred, very, very important.
You know, I identify with the part of Steve's story, many parts actually, but the part where you were talking about parentification, okay, of being the confidant of your mom, uh,
Yes.
substitute surrogate spouse,
Hmm. Hmm.
and with that some sort of emotional over over emotional enmeshment, okay,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and the kind of damage that does to a man's identity growing up in
Mhm,
terms of now coming into the world, right?
mhm, mhm.
How he's able to experience love, how he's able to see himself, right? Um, wha-
Absolutely.
would you kind of just again,
Right.
in a general way, talk
Yeah.
about some of the ramifications that can happen there?
So a real serious one, and that is, he said that I believe he said his mom talked about, like her husband, like her trouble with the husband. Okay, so let's say that I heard that right. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that was in there. What happens in a situation like that? Let's say that you're an extremely broken, wounded mom, you're getting your needs met through your children, they're having to be an extension of you rather than you being a whole person that has something to nurture and give them because of your brokenness, right? So if you're sharing with them, let's say you have a son, it's different for sons and daughters. This is a place where the impact of a mother wound on a daughter is a little different than the impact of the mother wound on the son. And that's societal. That's because of the gender differences. So, anyway, you're sharing with your son and you're sharing with that son about his own father. So he's sitting there, he's too young to really know how to separate this out. And he's sitting there hearing the mother talk about the unsatisfying relationship or anger, resentment, whatever she has with the father, but that father is his father. And that father is who he would be looking to see what is a man like in this society. What do men do? What am I supposed to be like as a man? How am I going to learn to protect if I'm not protected? How am I going to learn to provide if I'm not provided for emotionally? How am I going to learn to go to baseball games with my own son if that doesn't happen with me? In other words, how am I going to learn this? I'm not just not learning it, but I'm hearing the mother denigrate the father. So she's inadvertently denigrating fatherhood, but you're someone who's going to be a father. So it's like the wires in your head just get so confused. You don't have a chance to form your identity as a male in this culture. And that's very important to have a chance to do that. If your father doesn't do it, okay, that's one thing. Maybe you can get another father figure. But if your mother is sharing with you intimate things about the father and her, then that whole system's being torn down and you're not having a chance to really be shaped and molded in terms of your own manhood and your own fatherhood in this culture. So that's number one. Number two is while a child can't articulate this, they can't always process this, but while mom is making you her best friend, let's say you're a daughter, best friend, or your son, kind of surrogate husband here, while she's making you her best friend, she's not fulfilling the mom role to nurture you, to validate you, to affirm you, to listen to you, to be in tune with you, to be a comfort to you, warmth to you, all the things that, and love, especially the queen of all the virtues there, love, all the things that you need at that moment. So, like in the case of Steve was talking about, in that instant, the child is feeling kind of special because the mom's confiding in them, but at a deeper level, when they feel it and when they process it, there's going to be something that registers. I wasn't allowed to be a child. She wasn't there for me. I was there for her. And that leaves somebody feeling like they missed something, like the mom wasn't mothering them. They don't think of that as sufficient mothering, right? And
All
that can
right.
cause anger with anybody. Yeah.
So the anger that we heard expressed,
Mhm.
the
Yes.
uh, generalized anger without really understanding why. All
And
right.
it is generalized, yes. It actually comes out. One person said that this anger becomes general. So, say you're in a traffic jam, that you get really upset with that, or you drop something at home, you're really upset with that. It's anger that isn't even connected to the situation that you suffered from because you're not connecting it. Does that make sense? It's like
It
free
does.
floating anger. Yeah.
Now, could that anger almost become addictive? All right, as a place that again becomes familiar and comfortable, and so living with those feelings
Mhm.
winds up, can that become something that you
Yeah.
ruminate into and kind of get stuck in?
Oh, absolutely. And you don't realize, you just figure, you're just a person with a short fuse and not a lot of impulse control, not a lot of emotional regulation. You just get angry. In our culture, especially for a male, there's sort of a wide tolerance for allowing anger. So you're not going to recognize it as being unusual. You're not going to say, wow, what's wrong with me? And it's that way with a lot of the signs that we suffer from our early childhood. A lot of the things that we do, we're not going to just automatically connect it with the past.
Okay. All right. So moving on to other kinds of mother wounds. Okay. We've talked about a couple now, and thanks to
Mhm.
you, Steve, we've explored. Oh my goodness, the deep
Yes,
ramifications of overprotection. Okay.
yes,
Uh,
yes.
and how devastating that can lead to through the life. Okay. What are some other mother wounds that we'd like to at least touch on tonight?
Right. I think that overprotection he was talking about is, if you're indulged, if you're smothered, I mean, it probably feels really good when it's happening, when a mother or father is living through you, your mother, when she's living through you. But you're there's a covenant with that. If I'm a mom and I'm living through you and I'm smothering you and I'm just adoring you all the time, there's a hidden part to that, and the hidden part is, don't ever change that. Don't ever grow up. Don't ever leave me. Don't ever change our relationship, because I like it like it is. I need it like it is, right? So the male, especially in our culture, the male is going to feel a great ambivalence about not being there for mom and moving forward to be there for, whatever family that he
Okay.
has. There's going to be an ambivalence, because the flip side of that message of overprotection is, I want you to stay little and stay here so that I can mother you and overprotect you. That's the hidden message. Yeah.
Okay. Now we have a little time left. All right, not quite
Mhm.
half an hour, but Patrick, who's been very patiently waiting in the
Yes,
background,
yes,
I'd love to see if we could explore another story. All right, and
sure.
perhaps another type of mother wound that Patrick may be able to help us explore together. So, Patrick, would you like to come on board? All right,
Yes,
and
Patrick.
I'm gonna give you two some
Oh,
quiet time together. So let me come off stage and Patrick, would you like to share your story? What was your experience growing up?
thanks, Larry. Thank you, Lois. I'm sorry I can't set my screen in a way that makes it look balanced. Oh, here we go.
There we go.
Lois, I resonate with almost everything that I hear people saying, you're saying, and I'm still trembling emotionally from Frank's story. So it might take me a little while to just. I was the person that emailed in about guilt, because I find, I had a background, a mum that was lived in fear of dad because of dad's anger. We had a sister that wasn't allowed to live with us. So I have three brothers. We're all damaged. And excuse me, dad was always distant. Um, so I think perhaps the best thing is to focus on that guilt, and always, and whether there's a demonic influence involved as well, because of, I know one of the names of Satan is the accuser, and I often feel accused when I
Yeah.
know nothing about an incident. I might be, somebody may say, oh, my keys are missing. I will immediately feel anxiety, because they may think that I'm the one that stole their keys,
Wow.
or little incidents like that. Or even when nothing happens in my environment, internally, I'll find myself in a little courtroom, and I'm defending myself against something which is all
Wow.
fictitious.
Yeah.
It's not real, but there's been something that has stirred a guilt feeling in me, and I begin, and then I catch myself in the process of being the defender and the attorney who's defending a non-guilty party. It doesn't trouble me too much these days, but I know it's part of a broader damage in my life. But just if you could tease out a little bit of the possibility of demonic influence, along with a wound that exists that he feeds off of.
Well,
That makes
you
sense.
know, the enemy does accuse us and accuse our brothers to us. You know, that is something that he loves to do, like plant the seeds, of course. So if there's fertile ground there, any fertile ground, he will plant that seed. And what gives him fertile ground is like if we're angry with somebody or resent somebody or mad at them or whatever, then that's fertile ground in our own minds for those thoughts to come in. And the thing about those thoughts is you think they're your own, and they're not. The enemy is suggesting them. So real interesting dynamic there. What we know of scripture, right? And sometimes it's really amazing, because sometimes I have to catch myself. If you get irritated with somebody, then maybe the thought will come, well, they did this because of that. And you have to catch yourself and say, all right, that may or may not be true, but I'm just going to set that aside. There's a vigilance, even just normal getting irritated with somebody, or they do something they shouldn't have done, or they disappoint you in some way, whatever. I think that, unless we're really careful, that gives an opening of the enemy to plant those seeds within us. And interesting, I actually know of somebody, they're deceased now, but know of somebody where when they would get angry at somebody, they would truly believe, this, I know this firsthand, they would truly believe that the Lord was telling them about this other person. Really interesting. In other words, their own anger was being stirred up. The enemy was accusing, and they were, because they did hear from the Lord, they had a relationship with the Lord, they were thinking that God was coming and accusing other people. And I remember when I realized that, I remember thinking to myself, it's like I would have wanted to say to them, no, the Lord never, he would never come and accuse another person in my mind. He would never want to divide me against another person and say, oh, Lois, did you know this person did that? Ever, not ever. In other words, yeah. So it's an interesting trap there with the demonic. With the other part of it, and of course, there's no way of knowing without knowing, deeply your story and your background and everything. But the other part is, I have seen that before, of the person having that running, what I could say, like a running verbal dialogue inward, and they're always the person that's guilty. They're always the person that's guilty. And what's so funny about that is, okay, I'll tell you where that typically can come from. That can come from when you were a child, and this is hypothetical, but when you were a child, being blamed for things that you didn't do, and not being held accountable for things that you did do. In other words, somebody who was a disciplinarian, where they didn't seem to discipline you appropriately if you did something wrong, but they disciplined you inappropriately, and not just inappropriately, out of anger, out of it, like not dispassionate, but out of anger with a critical tone. That's where we get that always feeling guilty. And I had a friend that did that. It was really funny. It was some, like, you're right, drop the keys and, oh, I'm really sorry. Well, you had nothing to do with me dropping the keys, but if she did something herself, like one time she was late for dinner, right? She did something herself. And I said, oh, you're 2 hours late. We had the dinner 2 hours ago, and we've been holding it. I was trying to say, if you're coming for dinner, you kind of have to be here when the dinner's ready a little bit more. I was trying to say that to her, and it just went over her head. I remember trying to talk to her about that, and I became aware that she couldn't take any blame for that, even though I wasn't doing it in a bad tone or
Yes.
anything. I was just trying to say, try to be okay for dinner. But then I realized, as I got to know her more, I realized that the pattern for her really was not being able to have anybody blame her for anything. She felt I was blaming her. I was just sharing,
Because
but
she was
she
already
felt
carrying
blame.
such a load.
Yes, carrying such a load. But then if anything happened in the world, it's like we would make a joke about it at some point, like, oh, okay, you're going to take credit, you're going to blame yourself for this, because she blamed herself for everything, just like you're talking about. But she had a background that I could see the direct connection to that. Her father, how can I say? Very abusive. We'll just say very abusive, not a good disciplinarian, not emotionally regulated with children, nothing, really, really not good. And so she learned to feel guilty for everything except maybe what she had actually done, that she had actually done something. Really,
Mm.
really interesting. It's like it took that and flipped it upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's
that's what happens.
may I say that what's been most very helpful for me, and I'm not sure if it's a distorted loyalty to my parents, an excusative paradigm, but I've looked at Dad's life. When he was only 13, his own father had been gassed in World War One, so he has to go out working, selling fish to make some money for the family, and so on. My mum was only 13, and she came from the north of England and was sent down to London with her twin sister to work in what was then called a
Remember.
scullery, a
Yes.
kitchen
Yes.
for a Jewish dentist. So the more I've come to understand of those
Wow.
days, it helps me in a very large way to to not excuse, but to reasonably recognize the circumstances, the
Yes.
emotional climate in which my brothers and I were raised, and
Yes.
then coming in the divine will and the charismatic renewal and coming to know myself as a beloved son has been like a marvelous
Yes,
healing.
exactly. Yeah, it turns you totally around. You're able to let go. It's like letting go of the judgment just a little bit. When we found out
Yeah,
people's backgrounds,
I
I
feel
find
sorry for
myself like
Dad.
kind of letting go. You're kind of letting go a little bit, and that's very freeing. You're
Yeah,
not saying the thing didn't happen or didn't hurt, but you're letting go of something, and that's freeing you.
I think
You
it
know.
wasn't that you come to the understanding, Lois. It wasn't purposeful. It wasn't
Yes,
intended.
yes,
It
yes,
was,
very good. Not malicious, not predetermined or like premeditated murder. It wasn't
yeah.
premeditated murder. It was involuntary manslaughter. I'm just feeling funny there, but yeah, it helps you to know that the person was just being pushed and shoved by their own internal pain,
Yeah.
and trauma. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is helpful. It's
I
helpful.
love to how you were sharing about it's not bothering you as much now. And as you started talking about your journey with God, as your spiritual growth through these various spiritualities now, the divine will, um, the freedom you've experienced in this identity as a child of God has come and replaced, in a sense, the lying identity that
Yes.
perhaps you grew up with and felt compelled to continually defend, even though you knew it was not true.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true, Larry. There are many things that I recognize in what you and Lois have been saying, and other people's comments on living a life where you were neglected, not abused. I don't think we were beaten if we did something wrong, but um, I grew up. I was 30 before I thought I might be able to go to university, because if I had thought about going to university as a young man, my dad would have given me a backhander. Uh, no sense of self. You were talking about just no sense of self at all. So yeah, I there's so much. I'm sorry, I can't clear my throat. But in all the hurly-burly, the complexity and the changing dynamics for myself and my brothers, I see it in my brothers too, but they don't want to look at it. So I feel their pain too. But at this age and stage of my life, I'm a son.
Yes,
And mom and
yes,
dad and my brothers. Dad, I sometimes thought to myself, it doesn't matter how far you progress in life. Where did you come from? Where was your starting line? And it's way back there. You may not come very far, but you've made great progress. Yeah, in that sense.
I love
Well-
that it stood out. Oh, go ahead. The thing that stood out to me, everything you told me, is when you said you are a beloved son. And like, again, that just changed the whole landscape for me. And I could just see that you are now looking at these things from the vantage point of knowing way down deep that you are a beloved son. And that makes all the difference in the world, Patrick.
My
all
knees were shaking, Lois. When I said that in our little prayer group about 3 years ago, I was
Yes.
actually nervous because I was anticipating what they were going to say in their heads about me. Who do you think
Yes.
you are?
Yes, isn't that
Yeah.
something? Again,
Yeah.
that accusing. Now, when you're in that courtroom, the other thing I want to say is when you're in that courtroom, put on that hat that says, "I am the beloved son."
Lois, there's a little mantra.
I'm the beloved son,
There's a
the
little
son-
mantra I know that everybody in the divine will has. I hear the Lord say to me now, Patrick, you are my beloved son in whom I'm
Yes.
well pleased. My favor rests on you. Receive your inheritance.
Absolutely.
Before I formed you in Mary Eileen Higgins' womb, I knew you, son, and I wanted you. I've carved you on the palm of my hand. You are mine.
Exactly. That's
That-
beautiful. And living in that
True
reality.
for all of us.
Yeah, you feel like you could face a lion, living in that reality. You can, it allows you to look at your past without going deep down into it. You've been allowed to get that message and internalize that message so that then you could look at the very painful things that you were sharing.
And I think that was another thing that stood out for me there, Patrick, was that you were willing to look. All right. Your siblings, not so much. And so they continue under the delusion and the lie of whatever damage and how they manifested the damage in their lives. But that willingness to look not just at what quote they did wrong or what happened to me, but to see it through the eyes of what can I learn. What can I discover? And now with the layer of God's love, how can I grow from this? How can I grow in understanding and compassion, so that now I'm able to see others through these eyes of my now new discovered truth, my new identity as to who I really am.
Yes, yes. Yes. And that new identity is helping him sort out these things like he was talking about, the accusation and all that, from who he really is. Because if somebody's telling you, you're my beloved son, I'm pleased with you, and then somebody else planting something in your mind, or you're thinking it because of the woundiness, or you're guilty for everything, those two messages don't go together. So you're standing your ground and you're saying, I'm getting a message that comes to me that just really doesn't belong to me.
That's right.
And then
Boo.
when you hear the truth, it resonates within us.
Yes.
And that's how the truth will set us free.
Yeah.
Right.
Even hearing you say these things to me, there's a little voice that wants to rob me of what you're saying. Isn't it amazing?
But there's a steel inside of you. I see it. There's steel inside of you that says, you're not going to rob me. I know what God said. I know I'm living, I'm standing on the rock. I'm standing on truth. I see that with you.
You see the trick of it. You see the lie and the trickery.
We do. We see the grit. The grit.
Yeah. Patrick,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for sharing with us. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
beautiful,
I
right?
see you,
And
Patrick.
you're beautiful. You know I love you there, brother. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. And so, as we now come closer to the end of our time, all right,
Yep.
what I'd like to do is kind of share the hope of this journey, that while it can be long and it can
Yes.
define so much of our life, and even in the suffering of that life, how in the divine will, even the suffering, especially the suffering, can also be in God's divine will, and how He uses that,
Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
advancing us in ways that we don't even know. And
Oh,
in our prayers, what great fruit there can come from that. All right.
mhm, mhm. And this
How
is
do we
the
how do we combine suffering and healing, though, in a
yeah.
way that makes sense?
And this is the beauty. We are not that there's anything wrong with this, but we aren't generally saying, "Oh, I just want to be healed." That would be okay if you just said that. I deal with people a lot. Okay, want that. But we're saying something more. We're saying, I want to be healed to the point where I can take in love, where I can let love, where I can let God love me to the end of my own self unforgiveness and self hatred and self divisions, if they're there, right? I want to be healed to that point of intimacy with Jesus. I want to be joined to his passion and my passion. And I want to learn what authentic love is. So our goals are different than the goal that says, oh, I just don't want to have this awful feeling, which is legitimate. Nothing wrong with that, right? But our goals transcend that. Our goals are saying, Lord, I want you to heal me in this. And while you're doing, and this is what he promises really, while he's healing us in this, he's giving us opportunities to grow in virtue, and he's changing our heart. And as our hearts have changed, some of these painful things, just like Patrick, we're going to be able to say no to them. We're going to be able to say, okay, I learned this as a child, maybe, or I've felt this way all my life. I don't know where this came from. I don't remember, but it's not me. That's not who I am. We're going to be able to integrate ourselves more and more with our authentic who we are. And who we are is who we choose to be, not what was laid on us, right?
There you
It's
go.
who we choose to be. And the divine will, I think, gives us that light and that hope with the Holy Spirit. We say divine will, come think in my thinking, come understand in my understanding. And I believe he does. I believe the divine will comes and gives us a light to see this journey in light of where we came from, but also where we're going, who we are,
Yeah.
and where we're going. And that's the hope. The hope is where we're going. And also on the journey, I might mention, you can be healed to the point I know I was where I clearly, I would be willing to suffer every day for the rest of my life for my own mother. I would. That's just the truth. The healing has been that deep where I love her as I love myself. I
And I would
believe
say too that
that.
this love that you express for your mother,
Yeah.
I see expressed through your work, through your love of others, through your love of healing and helping people move. Right. I hear it in Steve in his saying that
Mm-hmm.
even though
That
his wife
goodness
left
comes
him,
through.
that he wanted to stand in that
Yes.
marriage still, and even in the pain of that, the commitment of love in that draws
Yeah.
me to how in this journey of the divine will, the Lord is
Mm-hmm.
drawing us to follow Him
Yes.
in the love, and hopefully
Mhm.
we like you say, we'd like to get healed, but God's
Exactly.
will is God's will, and as we surrender into that and into His own love for everyone, that we
Yeah.
follow Him to the cross. We
And
follow Him into love crucified
we
as
do.
we are in the mission of the divine will, trying to return that love which was not requited to Him, that we
Right.
do it on their behalf, right?
Exactly.
And this is the heart of the divine will.
Yeah, and the prayer, like my prayer when I talk about my own healing, I say to the Lord, heal me of all those things that that would get in the way of me taking in love and being close to you. In other words, if anything is getting in the way, and of course there are things, getting in the way, those things that are getting in the way of me drawing closer to you, heal me there so we
Amen.
can get even
Amen.
closer. And that's the healing, and that's the ultimate healing, is union with
is.
Christ, because
Yes.
then our heart is so changed that we can look upon our past with a new compassion, for the people
That's right.
that wounded us. Yeah, absolutely.
Compassion for the past and an openness of suffering for love in the future. All right.
Yes,
Even unto
yes,
death. All right. Death as
yes,
with Jesus,
absolutely,
one with him in his love. All right.
absolutely,
So,
yeah.
and that's what we have for you tonight. Okay. And that just out of that one section on the mother wound. I don't know where we'll go next week, whether there's more you'd like to explore in this,
There's
but that
more
was
I'd
a
like
lot.
to
And I
explore
want
in 2
to
weeks.
thank you, Steve, and I want to thank you, Patrick, for
Patrick,
helping us
yes,
in this
thank
journey.
you very
All right.
much, very much,
All right.
yes.
And for all of you, I want to thank you all for walking through this. It can be painful. All right. But that's not our enemy. All right. The enemy is not pain. It's the human will. All right. And as we walk through this love of God, his divine love in his that he's drawing us into to become love, that pain means less and less. What happens is our hearts are for giving ourselves out, pouring ourselves out utterly as Jesus did on the cross. And in that we find our union with him, and we find that the happiness of the fourth degree of living as if we were in heaven while yet on earth. So for tonight, thank you all. Please like this if this was a good for you, and share it with friends that might need it. And we ask that you continue in your journey. Be bold. Have the courage to look at the pain and let the Lord draw you through the process. Okay, it might be long or it might be short, but He wants you to learn and to be with Him and love. Amen.
Amen.
Amen and fiat.